On this episode of Living with a Classic, the cylinder head finally goes back on. Welcome back to Living with a Classic, and if you're new to my channel, I hope you stick around and consider subscribing. I put new videos every week on some Jaguar and classic car related content. And in today's video, the cylinder head finally goes back on my 1975 XJ6 project car. It's been off now for a while, about 2 months I think, and it's taken some time to sort everything out, but everything's been sorted now and it's ready to go back on. The cylinder has been checked, it's perfectly straight, all the valves have been out, been lapped, changed the valve stem seals, the camshafts are back in, everything is set up, it's been re-shimmed, and the block has been cleaned off, it's been painted on the side. All the studs are back in, so everything is ready. I am, however, alone in the workshop, and these are quite heavy, but it is possible to put them on if you're by yourself. It's definitely a lot easier if you're two, or even more people. But I'll show you a trick in this video how to get that head on by yourself if the engine is left in the car. So let's head over to my workbench, have a look at the head, and then let's put it on the car. Here's the head all ready to go back onto the car. In the previous video, I put in all the valves, the valve springs, new valve spring seats, and the camshafts, and I've set everything up. So I just gave it a final wipe down on the surface here with some brake clean and lint-free rag. So yeah, the cams are set up over here, so everything should be ready to go back onto the car. So let's have a look at the block. I've cleaned that up as well. I've cleaned up the surface on the block also. Wipe that down as well with brake clean, so that should be good. I've also put a very light coat of anti-seize on the studs just to help it slide down. Hopefully it won't get stuck halfway, or it'll just slide down easily. So now I'm going to see if I can grab the head and put it on. First, I need to lay down the head gasket. Now the new gasket is in place, we can go and get the head. I find that the easiest way to get the head on if you're by yourself is to actually get into the car or into the engine bay. You can stand on either side of the subframe, it's really strong. Just stand near the motor mounts. You can put your hands underneath the head, but don't touch the area that you just degreased. There are some indentations just in the middle where you can easily grab onto, and then you can hopefully slide it down over the head studs. It's really important to get it on pretty evenly because they're such long studs, and if the head doesn't go on parallel, it might get stuck and you have to wiggle a little bit. After a few more minutes of wiggling, the head is finally in place. It's all the way down. Got stuck a few times, so I had to lift one end and then push the other one down and get it down even. Definitely be easier if you were two people, but I actually got it in place, so I'm very happy with that. Now that it's in place, I'm going to start just filling up any holes so I don't get any debris in the engine. So I'm going to thread in just by hand all the new spark plugs I have. I'm also going to put some rags over here so nothing can fall down where the cam chain is. Then it's time to measure the height of the studs with all the brackets and the washers in place. And then I'm going to measure how deep the dome nuts are, just so I'm 100% sure the studs are not going to bottom out in the nuts. I put on the 2 lifting brackets and 14 new washers. I'm going to measure how deep one of the dome nuts is, how deep the threads are. And that's about how deep they are. And I'm going to check each and every one. There's no problem there. No problem. Definitely no problem. No problem. Yeah, they're all going to be fine. So that's great. Now then we're going to bottom out, so the same thing's not going to happen again. I'm going to take a little bit of oil, just put a tiny bit on each one, and hand thread on all the nuts. I have cleaned all the threads, so the nuts should just hand thread on really easily. All 14 dome nuts are snug down now. I also put down the 2 nuts over here and the 4 on the sides over here. So they're all snug down. Now you grab the manual, and if we have a look at that picture over there, you can see the sequence that you're supposed to tighten them. So you start in the middle and you work your way out, and then lastly you do the ones up front. The final torque figure is 54 foot-pounds, but I'm going to tighten it 3 times. So I'm going to start at, I think, 20 foot-pounds, go up to somewhere around 40, and then the final torque at 54. So I'm going to take my torque wrench and set it to 20. I've set my torque wrench to 40 now, so I'm going to tighten them a little bit more. I've set the torque wrench to the final setting now, 54 foot-pounds. So I'm just going to tighten everything in the same order, but to the final torque. Now everything is torqued to 54 pound-feet. I've also tightened the 4 nuts around here on the side and the 2 up here. They're just supposed to be tight. And now it's time to put the cam sprockets back on. There is a special cam alignment tool to make sure this notch is all the way up. However, since I haven't rotated the engine at all, and I left them up here at the exact same mark, they're completely up 9 degrees to this flat face when I took them off. Now that I hold the cam sprockets up, you can see the holes are perfectly aligned. So I'm gonna get those bolts in, these 2 here, those 2 over there. Then I'll rotate the engine over and get the other ones just like when I took it off. These 4 bolts are in now and tight. So I'm gonna rotate the engine over to get to the other 4 bolts. This is a later engine out of a Series 3, it's in a Series 2, but if you have an earlier engine, I believe Series 1 and earlier, maybe some early Series 2s as well, you only have 2 bolts, one up top, one up bottom, and they're locked in place with locking wires. These late ones, they only have these little washers on top instead. No locking wire. So I'm going to rotate the engine over clockwise. Okay, I have these 2 easily accessible there, and those 2 easily accessible as well. So I'll put those in, and then the cam chain will be in place. Now all 8 of those bolts are in and they're tight. The next step is to adjust the tension on the upper timing chain. That's done in here. So there's a wheel that spins around, and then there's a little locking pin here that when you push in, you can spin the wheel, and then it pushes out and it locks in place, and there's a locking nut there. I've loosened the nut, and I'm going to set up the camera so you can have a look inside here at that gear there, because that's part of the adjuster, so I can show you how it works. First, I'm going to show you how the adjuster works. There is a special tool that you push on here with 2 prongs that goes in, and that pushes the locking pin to the side and lets you rotate it. It's clockwise to loosen it and anti-clockwise to tighten the chain. If you don't have one of those tools, you can easily just use some needle nose pliers. This is some big circlip pliers here. So you have to loosen that nut first. You can put them in here, push that in, and then you can easily turn it anti-clockwise or clockwise. So I'll set up the camera up here and I'll show you when I move this back and forth, what that cog does. I've set up a light here, so you should hopefully be able to see what I'm trying to demonstrate. So I'm gonna move the adjuster back and forth a bit, and you can look at that cog. That's the chain loosened, and then this way it goes into the middle, and then the more you turn it anti-clockwise, the more it gets tight. So now I'm going to adjust the chain. Basically I want to adjust it so that there's no movement like this. You see how loose this chain is? So when I get that a little bit tighter, and yeah, I think that's pretty much perfect right there. Just going to make sure that the locking pin goes in. Now with everything in place, tightened and set up, I want to rotate the engine over a couple times just to make sure it rotates over smoothly. I'm also going to set it back at 0 degrees before top dead center on the crankshaft and make sure that my timing marks here, the notches on top of the camshafts, line up again. So I took out the spark plugs again, and I'm just going to put a drop of oil down in each cylinder just for some extra lubrication. And I'm just going to put a little bit on all the camshafts again. Now I'll just rotate the engine over a couple of revolutions. It feels very smooth. And you can see all the valves going up and down. I don't feel like anything is stuck or notching or hitting. And that went really well. So I've timed it back at 0 degrees here on the damper, and the notches on the camshafts are up top there, 9 degrees, they're perfect. Chain still feels really nice and good. Everything went up and down smoothly. There were no weird noises, no notchiness. Felt really good. So now that's all together. Now it's just everything around the engine. The exhaust needs to go back on, the alternator, all the brackets for that, power steering, pump. I'm putting all new hoses, fuel hoses, cooling hoses, of course. Starter needs to go back in. I need to put in all the core plugs, radiator support, carbs. It's a lot of stuff, but this is the fun part, just bolting everything back on. And also I am painting all of the things that were black on the car, like cam covers, inlet manifolds, and those things are all being painted. But I'll show you that in a future episode. And that's it for today's episode. I'm really happy that the head's finally on. It feels like such a big milestone, and it torqued down nicely. Nothing went wrong. I'm really happy about that. Like I just mentioned, there's a lot of stuff left to do before I can actually drive this car. But it doesn't feel that bad because it's just bolting things back on. It's a lot of new stuff, it's a lot of gaskets and hoses. It's always a lot nicer putting things back on the car that's nice and clean and new than to take a car apart, at least in my opinion. So if you like this video, please hit that like button, leave a comment down below. And until next time, I'm Adam, and this was Living with a Classic. I'll see you soon.